everyone. I think we're live. I'm going to give it a few minutes so people can start jumping in here. Looks like we've got just a few people kind of jumping in here, so I'm going to give it a few more minutes so that nobody misses out. It's been a while since I went live on Facebook. I'm kind of excited to check in with you guys again. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I am going to do my best to read through comments at the very end. So please note, I'm not ignoring you if you do not see me answer your comment. So welcome to Navigating No at the IEP Table. I am Nicole Schlechter, the IEP mom, and thank you guys for all joining us. Before we get started, please do not click on any spammy looking links in the comments. Fingers crossed the spammers have forgotten all about us, but just in case, I am not asking for any credit card information for this workshop. If you guys see something posted, please do not click on it. I really am hoping those crazy spammers have forgotten about us, since it's been a while since we went live here. Secondly, we're going to be talking about some legal topics, which is not a topic of conversation that we usually tackle here. You guys know where to find your legal rights, so I usually talk about all the other stuff that goes with IEPs. I am obligated to tell you that I am not a lawyer. I cannot give you legal advice, and if you need more specifics on special education law, please look up Ideal Law on the Department of Education website, or you can go to your state board of education. And also please note that the information that I'm sharing is based off of Ideal Law, which is a federal law that governs special education. So there might be some slight differences state to state, so you definitely want to be checking out your state board of education websites for any kind of clarification. Lastly, make sure you stick around until the end, because I have some really exciting news, and I'm not going to share it until the end because I know you guys are not here for that, but it is some really good stuff, so let's make sure that you stick around. Let's go ahead and get started. We've got quite a few of you guys on here. So how many of you have ever been told no at an IEP meeting? I have, lots of times. I hear no all the time, but sometimes it doesn't come right out, like it doesn't sound just like the answer is no. But they say things like, oh, we don't do that here, or he doesn't need that, or he doesn't qualify for that service, or that accommodation isn't necessary, that side of thing. Something along those lines is usually said, right? No is going to happen at an IEP table in special education. Sometimes no happens, and sometimes that answer actually is no. But sometimes if we ask the right questions after that no, we can turn that no into a yes, or maybe even a compromise. I recently put together a blog post for you where I outlined some of the phrases that you can use to stay calm when things get heated. So if you haven't, check that out. It's NicoleSchlechter.com/blog. But many of those phrases that we talked about in that blog post are also phrases that you can use when you hear no. So again, head over to NicoleSchlechter.com/blog if you want to check that out. But for example, in the blog, I talked about using clarification phrases. Like, what I hear you saying is, and those types of phrases might help you clarify a miscommunicated no. Like, maybe you're just misunderstanding that they're not actually saying no, but what they're really saying is X, Y, Z. Or when they tell you that they don't do that here, or they can't offer that service, what I want you guys to be asking is, can you show me the policy on that? Can you show me the policy is going to help you determine if this is actually a policy or if it's something that they don't typically offer. If it is something that they don't typically offer, find out why. maybe the person who makes that decision isn't sitting at the table. Maybe they aren't really telling you no, but they're saying no because they just don't know how to logistically make that happen, and they need to do more digging. Maybe you need to table the conversation for another meeting with the decision-making person sitting at the table with you, or more details on what they can actually offer your child. The phrase, "we don't do that here," is something that is commonly said at an IEP table, and it is not an answer. It is not something that is a phrase in special education. It makes no sense. It's not an answer. "We don't do that here" is not a thing. Our children have individual education plans, and that means that the supports and services in their IEP are individualized to meet their unique needs and not the needs of the district. And I've said this before, you guys have heard me say it, but not the needs of a district inside of a pandemic. We are creating IEPs based off of what is appropriate for your child and what they need to access their education at school. Maybe they don't actually do that here when they say "we don't do that here," but maybe it's just something that's never been done, and we've never done that before is different than "we don't do that here." We've never done that before means that we can get creative and possibly make it happen or come up with a happy medium compromise. For example, if you guys are not new here and you've been around for a while, you've heard me and my story. But for those of you that are new, I started this journey, this business, after a really traumatic events, I should say, a really traumatic half a school year for my son at his homeschool. We were basically forced to change placement, and I did not agree with it at all. I did not think it was an appropriate placement for my child, but I ended up giving in and finally agreeing because it was clear to me that the district, or I should say the school, was not able to meet my son's needs, and it was negatively impacting him and causing more challenging behavior at school. But fast forward a year after that happened, my son is in a self-contained classroom. He's met all of the goals and all of the requirements that he needs to be moved out of that self-contained classroom. And so at our next IEP meeting, the administrator was insistent that we needed to move my son back to his homeschool, and I was heated. Well, I should rephrase that, because heated doesn't really describe how I was feeling. I was definitely mad, but I was terrified for my son. Moving back to his homeschool was a traumatic situation all over again, and I was not having it. The administrator pushed, and I just stood firm. No, that is not appropriate. My son doesn't do well with change. He still had traumatic feelings about the staff at the old school and what had happened the year before. And he only had like a year left before we moved to middle school, so it didn't make sense to move him back. He was doing really well, like so much progress in just 1 year's time in comparison to how many years at the other school that they weren't making this much progress. So again, the administrator was pushing, and I just was not having it. And I kept saying, no, that is not appropriate. And you don't need to go into detail when you push back. You just say, no, it's not appropriate. Nope, it's not appropriate. I asked them to show me the policy, because the administrator was telling me that this was the way that things worked. When your child graduates from this program, we push them back to their home schools. Okay, can you show me the policy on that? If it was a policy and that's the way that it was, like, it's a little bit harder to argue with it, but it wasn't a policy. He met his goals, he met all of the requirements, but it wasn't a policy that he had to go back to his home school. They just had never done it another way. So long story short, my son was able to stay at the school he was at, where he was 90% of his day pushed out into general education, because that was what was most appropriate for him. There was no policy. And so individualizing the placement was the most appropriate option for him. And it wasn't an easy conversation. The school really had no idea how to individualize this kind of thing for him because they hadn't done it before. But just because we haven't done it before doesn't mean that we can't do it. It means that we have to find a creative way to figure out what is most appropriate for our child. Asking if there's a policy is one of the best things that you can do when you're sitting in a meeting and you don't agree with something and they're telling you no. Can you show me the policy on that? So also, occasionally there will be times that you can't reach an agreement with your child's team, and you have to refer back to your parent rights or your procedural safeguards. And I know that we are all grown-ups and we are capable of reading those safeguards, so I'm going to spare you the boring stuff and just skip to the important stuff. But again, I want to translate all of that boring stuff into everyday language because special education is its own language and it's really confusing for parents. So please remember, I'm not a lawyer though. This is not legal advice. But we're going to talk about some formal actions you can take to settle a dispute at school. My first suggestion is to always document your attempt at negotiation. Ask for a compromise. Ask to try something on a trial basis. Can we try it for 6 weeks and then meet again? But try to negotiate whenever possible and then document everything in writing. This is going to help you if you need to do further formal disputes with the school. If you have any other formal dispute, your next step, that documentation is going to be hugely important once you get to those dispute processes. If you can't come to an agreement though, you do have the option, one of the options that you have is to ask for an individual educational evaluation or an IEE. This is helpful when you don't agree with the school evaluation results, but that isn't the only reason to ask for the IEE. An IEE is an evaluation that is completed outside of the school, so not by school employees, and it's paid for at public expense or by the school. If the school agrees to this evaluation, they are obligated to consider the outcome when determining support. So what that means is that the individual educational evaluation will come up with a summary of suggestions of things that they think the school should implement. The school is not required by law to implement all of those things. They are required to look at the evaluation summary and determine what is most appropriate for your child. If the school does not agree to the IEE because they feel their evaluations were accurate or appropriate for the child, the school does have the legal obligation to file due process on the parents. And we're going to talk more about due process in a minute and what that looks like, so don't get scared. It's not scary. Due process is not scary. It's a big deal, but it's not scary. Another option that you can use to settle a dispute is through formal mediation. So this is a free and voluntary process where you sit down with the school team and a mediator who is a neutral third party to find a resolution to the disagreement. So the mediator is usually somebody that is employed by the state. So I'm in Illinois, so that would be the Illinois State Board of Education. It is not somebody who works for the district. It is a completely unbiased, neutral third party to kind of help navigate and find some sort of compromise or resolution to the disagreement. Parents can request that the mediator at any time, but you should always be prepared with documentation to support your request. So in special education, data is king. If you do not have data to support your request, it's unlikely things will go in your favor, just to put it bluntly. We have to provide the documentation that what we're asking for is the most appropriate option for our child. So the next dispute resolution that we're going to talk about is due process. This is a formal court hearing. You start this process by filing a complaint through the state, and you detail what the violation is that the school has done under IDEA law, so that Individuals with Disability Educational Act, which is the federal law. Filing due process, though, is a serious legal matter. Like, it's a legal proceeding, and there are no financial awards for families outside of occasionally legal expenses. You can sometimes ask for legal expenses to be reimbursed. But if the parent does win, the outcome, instead of it being monetary, like you'll never get awarded a monetary amount to be taken home with you. A monetary amount might go to the school district in order to provide services for your child, or but typically it's an award of compensatory services, or making up minutes for, you know, whatever their violation was, something similar to that. And if you guys hear nothing else from today, please, please, please do not attempt to do a due process hearing by yourself. Please contact an attorney. This is a lengthy and super detailed process, and a lawyer is going to give you the best chance at winning that due process case. To circle back to individual educational evaluation, if the school is the one to file due process on you after your IEE request, you do have the option to withdraw your request, and then due process just kind of goes away. There's some formal stuff that happens, but again, in everyday terms, that's kind of what happens. The school will withdraw their due process request. Or you can request mediation before following through with that due process hearing. So those are kind of your dispute options, but those key terms and phrases, I want you guys to go check them out on my blog. I am going to leave the link to it in the comments here, and then I'll share it for you guys again tomorrow so it pops up in your news feed. But for those of you who are sitting in meetings that feel like it is just one dispute after another, I totally get it. I have sat in your spot and I have felt completely overwhelmed. I have felt bullied and I have felt stuck. Like I didn't have any options. I knew what my child needed and I was just stuck. I didn't know where to go. And I started this business so that you don't have to feel that way. I literally said, I don't know what that job is, but that's what I'm going to do. I want to sit next to parents with kids like mine so that they do not feel the way that I felt at the IEP table. My role is to help you navigate special education so that it doesn't get all the way to a legal proceeding. And more often than not, I'm able to diffuse tough meetings while getting the child what they need in an appropriate way and mending relationships with the IEP table. So I am available to attend meetings, review documents, write letters, help you support your children in whatever way you need. Please do not hesitate to reach out. But I'm so excited. The very exciting news you guys have all been waiting for is that on March 15th, IEP Parent Academy is opening the doors for everybody. So IEP Parent Academy is a 4-part course that is going to help you learn IEP basics, but in everyday language. So I'm actually giving you a dictionary of special education terms for you to understand what all of those acronyms are and what phrases you should be using to make sure your team is listening to you. I'm going to give you the tools and the strategies that you need to make sure your child is getting exactly what they need, not just what the district is offering you. And I'm going to teach you how to be a better advocate for your child, because you are the only expert sitting at the IEP table who knows your child the way that you do. And I'm going to help you figure out a way to communicate that with the school in an effective way so that your child is making huge progress going forward. Families that I'm working with are prepared and they're confident and they're walking in the meetings feeling like they are the actual expert on the table, and I want you all to feel that way. I want to share all that knowledge with you. So if you are ready to stress less at an IEP meeting, if you're done with feeling stuck and you are ready for more progress, please leave your email below and I will add you to the waiting list. Registration is starting on March 1st, and I hope you guys are all there. I'm going to go through some of the comments and see if there's any more. Let's see. Stephanie says she's in a traumatic event now. So, Stephanie, you and I have kind of chatted a little bit, and I'm sure we'll have further conversation, but just be firm in knowing that you know your child best. Try and be as fact-based as possible when you're headed to the table. When you show up, and please don't take this as me judging, because I and a really emotional person. So when I show up to the IEP table for my son, I am an emotional mess. And I have a friend who is an advocate, and she helps me kind of navigate, and like, am I asking for something ridiculous, or is this reasonable? And show up though with less emotion and more facts. The parent input statement, you guys have heard me talk about that. We're talking about that in IEP Parent Academy. There was a whole video series just on your parent input statement, because it is the most important thing that you can bring to the table at an IEP meeting. Make sure it is detailing all of your concerns in a very fact-based ways. It doesn't have to be fancy. You can use bullet points, but make sure you're documenting dates and times and hard data. This is how many redirections he needs, and this is how long I'm sitting with him during remote learning and making sure he's actually doing what he's supposed to be doing. I talked to a family like that today. The school's data says, oh, he's doing great because they did observations through the computer. But in reality, there's two parents sometimes sitting there with him, and sometimes they have a babysitter who comes in and sits with him. He's participating in class, but he's not turning in his work. And the only reason he's able to participate and stay focused is because he literally has somebody sitting with him the whole time. All of those things are important for the team to know. You guys have this unique perspective of seeing how your child's learning now that we're learning at home in so many cases. And you get to bring that data to the table and say, you have your school data, but school's at home now, and here's my data. And you're going to put all that in the parent input statement, and you're going to remember that nobody knows your child better than you, and you should not be afraid to say all of the things that your child needs and ask for them. You can, in my opinion, you should ask for something huge and be willing to compromise on it. Because if you know what your child needs, sometimes you don't know what the best solution is to meet that need for your child. So if we ask for something huge and the school says, yeah, I don't think we can do that, but what we can do is this. And they come up with another solution. You're collaborating with your team, you're using those stay calm phrases that are from the blog, and you're showing up with your parent input statement, and you're gonna do great, Stephanie. You're a great advocate for your child. You and I have kind of talked, but I'm so glad you guys were here today. We have more live chats coming up. Go check out the events tab. And again, leave your email in the comments if you are ready for IEP Parent Academy. And I will see you guys soon. Have a good night.